Happy Hump Day, Story Church. Your work week is in full swing, and so is the kingdom of God. It's the kingdom that is the topic at hand when Jesus begins what we call the Sermon on the Mount. This past Sunday, we started a new sermon series called Flourish. This idea that God really longs to bring us to a place of flourishing, not just in the future in heaven, but even here on earth. You see, when God created Adam and Eve, He placed them in the garden, a garden filled with abundance. It was a place of flourishing. And so God is restoring His people through His Messiah. And so this is where we find ourselves as Jesus begins to teach. And He starts in this introduction to the sermon on the Beatitudes. Now, if you didn't have a chance to listen, I want to invite you to click on the link below and have a listen. But I also want to tell you missed a phenomenal time of celebration as 4 people shared their stories through believers' baptism on Sunday. So as Jesus begins this sermon, and He's speaking to a crowd, a group of people who are very much on the fringes of society. You could call them the have-nots of the world. And they're desperate to hear this message from the Messiah. They're anxious to hear as He speaks of the kingdom, well, who is it for? What will it be like? Are we invited? Everything they knew of life was that they did not belong. They were the outcasts. And Jesus is saying to them, yes, you are involved. You are invited into the kingdom of God because the kingdom is for everyone. It's not about being poor and it's not about being rich. The kingdom has been made available to everyone through Jesus. In our faith, He has invited us in by His grace. And so Jesus is blowing up broken paradigms, these worldviews that are competing against the very kingdom of God. And He's saying, look, I'm changing everything. But we also said it's important to understand these Beatitudes are not a checklist. We don't check them off and say, okay, now that these things, now I've proven my citizenship. We don't earn our right to become a citizen of the King. It's very much by His grace. And so as Jesus is just blowing up one paradigm after the other, and he's inviting everybody in, we take a closer look, and we begin to ask ourselves, do we fit the characteristics that Jesus is laying out for a kingdom citizen? I think it's interesting. One of the marks that He gives us is that we will hunger and we will thirst for righteousness. You see, a true citizen of the kingdom, someone who really wants to flourish in this kingdom, will be someone who hungers and thirsts for God. As a Christian, we should have a very different worldview. Our longings should be very otherworldly. And so I've had to stop this week and ask myself, what is it that I'm hungry for? In what ways am I thirsty? And if I'm honest, it's not always for the things of God. It's not always for the benefit of other people. In fact, a lot of times I'm hungry for approval. Or maybe it's that I want to prove myself in my work. And if I can just show the results of my work, then God will be pleased or other people will be impressed. And so there's other times where I find that I'm just controlling and I want to be in charge of the results. I want to make things happen. It just feels good to work hard and see the fruit of my labor. But Jesus is reminding me that He's the King of the kingdom. And I'm a citizen. I'm a subject now. He's a good king. I can trust Him. In fact, I'm not just a subject of the King. I'm actually a son of the King. So I don't have to prove myself. I've been given rights and privileges in the kingdom of God, and I can live in this state of abundance. I can flourish here on earth, and Jesus doesn't need me to prove myself. So, church, I ask you, in light of these Beatitudes, are you flourishing? And if not, what is it you're hungry for? What is it you're thirsty for that is opposed to the kingdom of God? This is the check I have this week. What is it that God's speaking to you? Take a minute. Reflect. Maybe drop a line in the comments section. Encourage others that you too are finding these competing values that you need to give up as a citizen of the kingdom. Love you, church. Praying for you always.